This is truly fascinating indeed. I never even considered that as an option. But it's all starting to make sense now. All right, ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? After minutes upon minutes of intense research, I have in fact discovered right here and now that my character, Captain William, from the hit One Piece D&D series led by Rustage, is in fact a rogue. So I should start playing him as a rogue. It's amazing the things that you learn. Okay, but something else that I discovered recently, and way more integral to the plot of this video, is some interesting facts about pterosaurs. That's right, we're starting this one off with a dinosaur facts! Okay, so we have here a pterosaur, pterodactyls, pteranodons, such as King, and the thing that I have discovered about them that I haven't heard anybody else, any other paleontologist or archaeologist or anybody talking about right now. I rewatched every single Jurassic Park and Jurassic World movie, and they did not mention this a single time, so I feel like I deserve credit for this one, okay? Alright. It turns out pterosaurs are made out of 100% polyester fiber. Not only that, but they are also manufactured in 2018 by the Toy Major Trading Company in China. Alright, so that sheds a little bit of light, I guess, right now on dinosaurs in general. Take that. I want to see that in the museums. Okay. Alright, so hello, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about King, who is, in fact, a pteranodon, but that's not even the most interesting thing about him, Okay, here's a question for you. If you could take any One Piece character and bring them into our world for 1 hour to conduct an interview, like an actual sit-down kind of interview across the table with any One Piece character, who would you pick and why, and which questions would you ask them, okay? Now, that doesn't mean they have to answer your questions, it just means you're having an interview with them, right? You can't just like, oh, I want to talk to Brooke, and it's like, alright, so Brooke comes into our dimension, sits down, and he's like, so what was it like being on that ship for 50 years with the corpses of all of your dead crewmates? That must have sucked something fierce, huh? And he's just like, he just gets up and leaves, But no, honestly, I'm being 100% serious right now. I think I would like to talk to King, all right? Because he's the most fascinating right now. I mean, we figured out the whole deal with Kaido. He's a duck dragonfish. We all know that already, right? Sit down with King for a sit-down candid interview. I'd be like, so, you are the last surviving member of the Lunarians. That might not be the greatest way to start that question, but so you're the last member of your species that were brutally wiped out by the celestial dragons. Is that what led you to the bondage thing? And King would be like, well, no, actually, that's something completely unrelated, but the stories of my beginnings, that would be really fascinating, okay? So we found out a little bit more about him last chapter. Rather than him saying it, though, it's Queen. So Queen seems to know a lot about the Lunarians, and I feel like that's not because King told Queen about him, because number one, we've already found out King does not like to speak about that stuff very often, and even when Zoro cracked his mask and you kind of saw part of his skin and his hair, and maybe like a little bit of a tattoo he has, like defining characteristics, he was like really offended by that. Like, you don't do that, you don't touch the mask or whatever. Okay, so considering that is his personality, and also considering he doesn't like Queen very much, I don't think he would sit down and explain to Queen all this. So Queen, being a scientist, being a member of MADS, and he used to work with Vegapunk, maybe at some point he discovered what the Lunarians were in like a history book. Like, I could see Vegapunk studying that kind of stuff, right? So maybe he learned it through that. But at any rate, Queen is very vocal about it to Sanji. He's just like, oh, your friend Zoro is fighting against King. Well, I don't really like the guy. He's kind of a jackass. But to be honest with you, your friend Zoro's going to lose. He can't win. Because King is a Lunarian, and Lunarians back in the day were revered as gods, and they can survive any natural environment, and they can manipulate fire. Like, there's just no way that your friend's going to win, okay? And Sanji asks the follow-up question of, okay, well, if they're so indestructible and almighty, how did they get wiped out? How are they almost extinct? How is King the only one left? And, Queen doesn't answer that. He's like, I guess you're just gonna have to ask him yourself, or, read a history book for God's sake. And then he fires up his laser beam. So, I don't know, as that fight continues between Sanji and Queen, we might in fact find out more about King along the way. So, The big thing is that they seemingly can survive in any natural environment. That was the statement that we learned in the last chapter, okay? Now, let's do a little bit of a brief recap on all of the different races that exist in the One Piece world, okay? And I've done videos about this as well, but let's go down the list. First, we have humans, and humans come in various shapes and sizes. You know, some humans are really tall, you know, like Whitebeard, for example, maybe like giant blood mixed in there. Some resemble like onions, like Moria did, example of that, but you know, humans relatively appeared like they do in our world, okay? And there's different tribes like the Kuja and everything, and like the tribe that existed on the Torino Kingdom where Chopper got sent, but there are humans. Then of course there's the fishmen and the merfolk that live under the sea. Then of course there's the giants. Now not all giants come from Elbaf, but a lot of them do, and of course giants are, you know, giant. I think an average height for a giant is somewhere between 15 to 18 meters tall. The shortest is 12 meters. Dory and Broggy were a little bit taller than average. They were around 20, 21 meters tall. Then you have ancient giants that are even bigger than that, like, you know, 60 meters, like for Ors and Ors Jr., as well as the numbers. The numbers are artificial, though, so not really the same thing. Then we have the Skypian races, and, you know, that includes the Bjerkins, the Skypians themselves, and the Shandians, okay, that all have wings on their back, right? Then we have the minks. You know, there's Carrot back there. We have the minks, who are basically furries. You know, they're not basically furries. They are furries. Hashtag not a furry, but they are furries. They can manipulate electricity, or more like static electricity with their fur, their electro, and they can also go into their Sulong form by staring at the moon. Then we have the long arm and long leg tribes. Their names pretty much give away what their characteristics are. Same thing with the snake neck tribes. Then we have dwarves, very tiny, like the Tontada tribe, you know, Leo and everybody at Greenbit. The Third Eye tribe, we've yet to actually see a full-bred member of the Third Eye tribe. We've seen Pudding, but Pudding is a human Third Eye tribe member hybrid, okay? And so for that reason, we don't really know what the full trait is with them, but the idea is that purportedly when they open up their third eye on their forehead, they can hear the voices of all things. So the idea is maybe a level of clairvoyance, or when they truly awaken their third eye, maybe they can see into your souls and they can understand like any written language or spoken language ever crafted, okay? So maybe something like that for the Third Eye tribe. And you know, there's other, you know, species that exist out there that might be like, I know there's wontons. Wontons are crosses between giants and fishmen, but those are so far like the only like races we know of that aren't like artificial, like the numbers, for instance, or some like, you know, like robots like the automata or anything like that. But then finally we have the Lunarians, okay? Now, given the fact that they said they can survive in any natural environment, I'm going to go ahead and assume that all those other races that we spoke about, the Lunarians have all of the traits that they do, or they have the same things that make them strong. So, for example, being able to survive in any environment, that to me says that they can survive at the bottom of the ocean, just like the fishmen and merfolk, or they could survive in the sky, just like the Skypians, with less oxygen, right? They could have the physical capabilities of giants, just in a smaller package. You know, now minks are able to summon electricity. Lunarians can't really do that from what we've seen, but King is able to summon fire. That was something that actually took me a while to realize, and it was like, wait a second. Minks are able to summon electricity, and fishmen and merfolk are able to use their specific combat, their martial arts, to control like sea currents in the water. They're not like, you know, they're not like able to, like, Jinbei cannot just summon water out of nothing, but, you know, he can control water currents and like send like water pillars and spears at people, okay? And so then King can control fire. So you know where we're going with this, right? Yeah, like, Jinbei, not just Jinbei, but all fishmen and merfolk are waterbenders. And, you know, therefore King and the Lunarians are firebenders. I guess also minks are as well, because they can summon electricity, right? The Skypians, I guess, could kind of be airbenders, not exactly. I mean, they do have the breath dials and the jet dials, but that's not like a natural capability of themselves. They do have wings, but we never saw Conus, like, bust out like an air sword or something like that. We saw Eric do that. Eric could be an airbender. Now we just need to find the earthbenders in One Piece. I guess Pika, I suppose, maybe. But no, but you see where I'm going with this. Certain races in the One Piece world are capable of channeling the power of the elements, okay? Now, like I said, with the minks, you could say, well, that's because they're covered in fur, so they can kind of learn to control the static electricity coming off of themselves. They can, like, store it and then use it as they see fit, as a weapon. And with the fishmen and the merfolk, you could say, well, it's not exactly like they're manipulating water. They're using, like, a type of martial art to, like, bend the water to their will and then fire it off, okay? It's not like they have, like, psychic control over the water. But When it comes to King, it does seem like he is, yeah, he's Zuko. He's a straight up firebender from Avatar, right? If he wants, like, just summon a fireball and throw it, light himself on fire, light his leg on fire to kick Zoro like we saw in the last chapter, and apparently also blow himself up with zero repercussions if he also so desires to do that, right? And he didn't do that just out of nowhere. Well, it was out of nowhere, but it seemed to be triggered when Zoro stabbed him, as if, like, King wanted him to do that. Like, King was, like, rushing at Zoro, and then he stopped all of a sudden, and, he's like, oh, what are you gonna do, stab me? And Zoro's like, yes, and then he stabs him, and then he blows up, right? So maybe it's an idea that, like, not just fire, it's the ability of combustion in general. Like, anything related to fire, heat, and explosives, King has complete control over. Now, I liken this to maybe being similar to, like, magma, like he grew up in, like, a volcano or something like that, in that very harsh, inhospitable environment, like the Lunarians existed around the base of an active volcano on the Red Line somewhere, and that could have been the case. And what Queen says, maybe it wasn't like they all lived like that, but maybe King's particular tribe might have lived like that, because the idea is Lunarians lived at the top of the Red Line before Marijois ever became a thing, okay? And then when the Celestial Dragons took over, they annihilated all of them. How did they do that? Well, we'll get to that in a second. But if they lived way at the top of the Red Line, their bodies might have just acclimated to a bunch of different harsh environments, right? Also, the idea that they were revered as gods, I want you to think about the One Piece world and the way it was, like 1,000 years ago, or even further back than that. I mean, the Lunarians might have ruled over the entire world from on top of the Red Line for, like, 5,000, 10,000 years. I mean, it might have been a really, really long time ago. Well, what if it was a situation where back in the day, you had humans, fishmen, merfolk, giants, skypeans, minks, long arm, long leg, and they were all living relatively in harmony. Like, there was no central world government yet to, bring about slavery and oppression into the world. It was just all the races of the world all living together. And I'm sure there was strife every now and then, but for the most part, they were all living together, okay? And what if it became a thing where it was just like, the most powerful survive, or the most powerful get to rule? And so out of all these races, giants, skypeans, minks, long arm, long leg, humans, it was the Lunarians that were just physically the strongest. They had the most stamina, the most endurance. They had the ability to just summon fire whenever they wanted. Fire, which is kind of the cornerstone for civilization, the ability to just, cook your food and, bring about, light and heat whenever you want. And so maybe it was just like, all right, well, they're the Lunarians. They are the supreme, they're the gods of this world. They just are. They're stronger than every other person on this planet, so they get to live at the top of the Red Line, and they're the ones that lord over us. Now, we don't know if when the Lunarians were actually on top of the Red Line, if they actually took that role of gods, like, seriously. Like, Queen says that they were revered as gods, and the stories that Whitebeard told Marco were very similar. Like, oh yes, people revered them as gods, but did they actually act like gods? Like, were the Lunarians back in the day living on top of the Red Line? Did they have giant cities and thrones and just like, we lord above all on top of the Red Line, pass down a decree to those below in the mortal realm? Kind of like what the Celestial Dragons are doing right now. The Celestial Dragons, by the way, do refer to it as an upper realm and a lower realm. And the upper realm is just Marijois, where the Celestial Dragons live, and the lower realm is literally everything else on the planet, right? So did the Lunarians do something similar, where they actively, like, passed down decrees and, like, ascended from the upper realm and were like, you will all obey us, for we are the greatest? Did they do stuff like that? Or were they just a race that lived pretty much isolated, kind of stayed out of everybody's way, and because they were so strong and they had their, their pyrokinesis and combustion abilities, they, were revered as gods. Other races feared them, but they did not actively lay down their, like, divine smite. I mean, maybe every once in a while they did. If there was a lot of Lunarians, somewhere maybe there might have been a Lunarian that was like, I will attempt to be the god of this world. It's like, ah, great, we got a light Yagami here, and just like, it's like he descends from on high to like, fireball, fireball, fireball. And it's like, maybe every once in a while you get someone like that, but maybe the Lunarians mostly were a peaceful race that lived on, maybe they had like little cities and stuff, like carved into the rock bed, like caves and caverns and stuff in the top of the Red Line. And, they were the only people able to live there because of their bodies, the way they're acclimated to these harsh environments, okay? But that's the one thing I arrived at. Like any other trait, the strength of the giants, the ability to fly like the Skypeans, the ability to breathe underwater like the fishmen and merfolk, I think that the Lunarians have all of those traits, if not upgraded forms of those traits. Now, remember, King also did consume a devil fruit, so you might say, well, that would give him a weakness to water, right? Well, if it's the same thing what I'm thinking of, it might be a situation similar to Jack. Remember, Jack ate a devil fruit, but he's also a fishman, right? So when he was knocked into the water by Zunisha, he didn't die. He was still able to breathe and live underwater. I'm assuming eating fish whenever they came by. It's just he couldn't move. He was immobilized because of his devil fruit power, but he could still breathe, okay? So it might be the same situation with King. Like if Zoro managed to like slash King and knock him into the water, because he ate a devil fruit, he wouldn't be able to move, but he might still be able to breathe. And in fact, would he even be weakened by the water? That's another thing, too. What if it's a situation where literally the devil fruit weaknesses do not apply to Lunarians? Like, and maybe Zoro might even try that. Zoro's fighting King, he might knock him outside. Well, I guess it might be kind of hard to do that because Onigashima's floating. But remember, there was the pond. There was like that big pond area at the beginning of Onigashima, like in the front yard where that giant sword was and the gazebo and everything. So if that is still there and that didn't get drained, maybe King might get knocked into that pond by Zoro, and he's just like, all right, now he's underwater. Well, I didn't defeat him, I didn't kill him, but he won't be able to move now, so at least he'll be taken out of the fight. And King just like shoots out of the water like a missile, and he's like, wait, what the hell? And then like the fight continues. He's like, I thought you were a devil fruit user. How did that not hurt you? And just like, devil fruits. It only affects, the other beings that way. My kind are not weakened or impeded by the power of devil fruits. There's a theory out there right now because Lunarians are, they're referred to as gods, and they lived on top of the red line, and just how strong they are and how ancient they are, that Lunarians might have very well had a hand in crafting devil fruits. Or at the very least, like I said, devil fruit powers are not, the weaknesses are not brought upon the Lunarians, okay? And that might not even be a situation with the Lunarians creating devil fruits. That might have something to do more with just their biology. Like, it might be a situation where, like, yes, if any other being on the planet consumes a devil fruit, they are impeded. They cannot swim. But because of Lunarian biology, that weakness does not apply to us. Our bodies are able to circumvent that weakness of devil fruits, so we can receive the power without any of the drawbacks, okay? So that might be another reason. I mean, hey, if they're apparently gods, and they're apparently the strongest beings that have ever existed on the planet, like, naturally, then, if there was one species that was immune to devil fruit weakness, and it was the Lunarians, given all we've learned about them, I think that would make sense, right? Are they the ones that created the devil fruits? That's a big, big thing to claim. I like the concept, I like the idea, and if they are like the most ancient race that has lived for, tens of thousands of years in One Piece, I could see that. I could also see it, like, what if they created the devil fruits, and then that's when the Celestial Dragons took over and, like, stole the devil fruits, or stole the source of the devil fruits, or anything like that, and used the power of the devil fruits to defeat the Ooh, that's an interesting way to take it. This, by the way, might have been something someone else said, because I saw that theory that Lunarians created devil fruits. I saw that somewhere else. But I wanted to say, it's like, well, okay, that's not a crazy idea. What if Lunarians, they were naturally strong. Without getting devil fruits involved, they are naturally strong. And King has said that to Zoro many times throughout this fight, okay? The fact that he can manipulate fire and all that stuff, that has nothing to do with the fact he ate an ancient zone and he could turn into a Tyrannomodon, okay? Has nothing to do with that, okay? So they were naturally very strong. But what if they created devil fruits? Or, I don't know, what if, like, devil fruits came about through, like, a natural biological... Maybe they poop devil fruits. Did anybody come up with that idea yet? I don't know. If you did, I apologize, but maybe they pooped devil fruits, because Luffy's always going around being like to every single new person and every new species he meets, like, hey, do you poop? Hey, do you poop? He said it to everybody. He says it to mermaids. He said it to Charlie, said it to Charlie, says it to Brooke and everything like that. What if it would be funny if King actually meets Luffy and Luffy's like, oh, cool, you're a Lunarian. I don't know what that is, but do you poop? And King's like, actually, I do. I poop Pteranodon fruit. That's what we do. And it's like, then the world government and the Celestial Dragons took all of our poop and then ate it and then became devil fruit power users, and they defeated us, and then that's how it happened. Because, Lunarians might be, super, super strong, but if you have a powerful enough devil fruit, a powerful enough Logia, you might at least be able to match them, right? And something like that, I suppose, right? Devil fruits are Lunarian poop. Never thought that was the conclusion I would arrive at in this video. What else? Oh, the sun god, Nika. Right, okay, that's something else, because we're learning about a sun god, and then also we're learning about Lunarians, lunar, so moon, sun and moon, you know, there's a comparison there, not just a Pokemon game, but also the idea that, like, okay, well, what if the Lunarians were from the moon originally? Now that there's a little bit of a problem there because, you know, Eneru went to the moon and we saw the ancient city of Bierka on the moon, and it had the mural, and the mural depicted the Shandorians, the Skypians, and the Bierkans specifically. Only 3 of them, okay? It didn't depict anything similar to Lunarians. However, King does have wings that are similar to Skypians and more like the Bierkans on the way they're pointed downward. So I guess it could refer to that, or maybe the Lunarians left the moon. Like, maybe life as we know it in the One Piece world didn't begin on the Earth, it began on the moon first. Like, we're talking maybe millions of years ago at this point. Like, it began on the moon, and the Lunarians left the moon and went down to the Red Line, and all the other races, the sky races, like the Skypians, Bierkans, Shandians, that all came way later down the line, like in the past few thousand years comparable, but the Lunarians were first, and they were here since maybe like the dawn of time or something like that. So since they're lunar, maybe like the idea of a sun god coming about to maybe oppose them in some way, maybe that was the dynamic there, or maybe the sun and the moon working together. Perhaps, I'm not sure there. But yeah, like, the idea that they were wiped out by the Celestial Dragons, or the ancestors of the Celestial Dragons, they were wiped out by the 20 kings that created the world government, as well as the giant army I'm assuming they had, as well as the ancient weapons. You could say that as well. Maybe they had access to the ancient weapons. Maybe the Lunarians were keepers of the last ancient weapon, Uranos. If that's the case, maybe the 20 kings captured Uranos and then piloted it. You know, it's like a giant UFO with like a death laser or something, and they went up and they fired it, and they defeated the Lunarians that way, or something. You need some pretty heavy artillery in order to take them out, given how, like, powerful they are, and they can control fire and, like, flamethrower you whenever they want it, okay? So it would be like, you know, I could see it a bunch of different ways. I could see it like humans discovered the power of the devil fruits and they made a devil's bargain. Maybe it's not Lunarians created the devil fruits, but maybe it's like some Attack on Titan level shit now, where it was like, maybe humans made like the Faustian deal with an actual devil, and then devil fruits came into existence. And the whole purpose of devil fruits, the whole reason they exist, is so humans could fight the Lunarians, or the 20 kings specifically could fight against the Lunarians. Like, they made this Faustian deal, and it sort of affected all of humanity, not just themselves. But the 20 kings were like, we need to conquer the Lunarians, we need to defeat them and take the Red Line, and they'll do anything possible in order to make that happen. And so they made a Faustian deal. It's like, very well, humans, we will give you the powers of the cursed devil fruits. The powers of devil kind exist within each fruit. They learn, they adapt, they change, and forever you will be taken the ability to swim, but they will give you power to defeat those who you despise. And then the humans were like, yes, and then they got the powers, and they maybe used them to defeat the Lunarians. Might not be the Lunarians have anything to do with devil fruits, but they were thinking of a word, they were the target, there we go, I'll leave that in, screw it, alright, that's what happens. That happens so many times when I'm doing these videos, like, thinking of a word, it's probably something I learned in, like, kindergarten. Okay, what word am I thinking of? Target. The Lunarians were the target of, you know, the animosity of the humans, and that's why they turned to create the devil fruits, or the devil fruits were made through that hatred or something of that nature, right? Something along those lines. It's possible. Anyway, I don't think, like, King hasn't really said anything to Zoro, so I don't really think we're gonna find out anything from King directly. I don't think King's gonna sit down with Zoro after the fight's over and be like, allow me to tell you the story of my tribe. You know, I doubt that. So I guess it's all up to Queen, or maybe after the fight is over, maybe they can find, you know, Queen's laboratory or something, and there's books in there, like history books, and Robin would be interested in that. Robin might actually know about Lunarians. We don't know that. Nobody directly asked her about it. Like, hey, Robin, do you know anything about Lunarians? And she's like, oh yeah, I remember reading some books back at O'Hara before it burned to the ground. That, yeah, they were apparently this race of gods that lived on top of the Red Line. They pooped devil fruit, apparently. It's like, oh, interesting, right? So Robin might actually just know about about something, and then after this arc is over, Robin is the one that explains it. Maybe Zoro will ask her after it's over, like, hey, I fought this guy, King, and he said he was a Lunarian, and just like, oh yeah, the Lunarians, and so there you go, right? Anyway, let me know what you know down below, because, you know, it's probably not much more than anybody else, but, you know, might as well throw out ideas. We're pretty much at the point there where we're just throwing darts at a dartboard, you know what I mean? I've made a bunch of videos on King, and yet I still feel like we don't know much more about him or the Lunarians, but we can keep trying, right? Okay. Right, but anyway, that was the video. Now let's get into an actual dinosaur fact. I have a real one for you as well. So today's dinosaur fact is going to be on one of my favorite dinosaurs, the Spinosaurus, okay? And you know what? I was looking into seeing, like, okay, the Lunarians are, like, the strongest beings that have ever existed in One Piece, so what was, like, the deadliest dino that ever walked the Earth? And, of course, a lot of this is subjective, and there might be a devastating dinosaur that could fly and spit laser beams that we just haven't dug up yet. But for right now, I'm gonna go with my personal favorite, the Spinosaurus, okay? So the Spinosaurus looked like this. It was a semi-aquatic dinosaur that lived in northern Africa during the late Cretaceous period. They were the longest theropods to ever exist that we know of that have currently been discovered. Here's a general chart comparing to the size of a T-Rex, okay? T-Rex is in the purple, Spinosaur is, you know, at the front. And so in Jurassic Park 3, the Spinosaur is actually the thing that defeats the T-Rex. And I know a lot of people that are fans of those movies, I have a friend that's way into those movies, is like, yeah, screw the Spinosaurus, the T-Rex is where it's at, you know? And so in Jurassic World, there was even a scene where the T-Rex, like, destroys the Spinosaurus fossil. Like, yeah, the T-Rex is really on top. But I don't know, looking into the Spinosaur, I could see why they did that with Jurassic Park 3. I could see that. It's like, hey, we need to figure out an even bigger and even deadlier dinosaur than the T-Rex. It's like, well, what about the Spinosaurus? Like, yeah, throw that in there. That'll be the new iconic dinosaur that everybody loses their shit over. And it turns out it really wasn't. People still love the T-Rex to this day, but I love the Spinosaurus, damn it. So the Spinosaurus was basically like a giant crocodile. Like, think of a modern crocodile that lives and hunts primarily in wetlands and around the water, and that was the Spinosaurus. And the idea is that it even had, you know, like an aquatic gill-like tail that allowed it to be propelled in the water, and its bone density in its legs was a lot, you know, like more dense. Its bone density was dense, so it like allowed it to actually, its buoyancy and be underwater and be able to hunt its prey. Like, can you imagine being like a prehistoric fish just, you know, swimming in the water, and then all of a sudden just and then just, you know, the freaking Spinosaur comes into the water, eats it, and then leaves? God, that's terrifying. One of the fossils, this was actually, I think, the first dinosaur fossil to be discovered in the country of Egypt way back at the beginning of the 20th century, around 1912. And it was discovered, and people were like, okay, let's like look into this, and it was transferred to a museum. But unfortunately, that very first fossil record of a Spinosaurus was lost and purportedly destroyed during the chaos of World War II. So that sucks. So they've discovered other fossils since then, but like the original that you maybe can compare it to has been lost. Okay, because there was a lot of, you know, bombing and devastation during the Second World War. But yeah, it was basically like a giant, think of like a giant crocodile that walks on two legs, that was bigger than a school bus and weighed upwards of like 7 to 8 tons at the low end, but also there was like that was like the original idea, that it was like 7 to 23 tons, but then there was like other stuff that came to light that's like, okay, it wasn't that long and it wasn't that heavy. But, you know, it was still a very large dinosaur that was probably the largest theropod, much bigger, and the largest carnivore perhaps ever, the largest land-based carnivore that might have ever lived on this planet, okay? So you kind of have to respect the Spinosaurus. I mean, they weren't completely wrong in Jurassic Park 3 when they had it destroying and completely ripping apart the T-Rex. I mean, it's kind of true. It's probably what would have happened back in the Cretaceous, but whatever. If the T-Rex is still your favorite dinosaur, I guess that's fine. All right. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. This will be Tekking and Barry and a Pteranodon signing out. Actually, I think this is just a pterodactyl. Pterodactylus. It's a pterodactylus. Bye, everybody.